Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and as promised, I was back as quick as I could be using one of the stamp sets from the Simon Says Stamp March card kit. This card took on an entire life of its own. I ended up using just the stamp set and then some Simon inks to create a more masculine themed card. So I pulled out Simon's Fog, Mint, and Audrey blue ink. Literally was just kind of picking colors at random. I was like, gray is nice, this mint green is nice, Audrey blue is one of my favorites. Let's blend them all together. So that's literally what I'm doing. I started with just some Simon 120 pound cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, just an A2 card front size. And I'm using one of my Picket fence blending brushes, and I'm just using one brush. I've done multiple videos, showing how I'm like, I use one brush for every color. This time I'm using just one brush, and between colors, I just rub it on a microfiber cloth. And I like to have a piece of scrap white cardstock when I'm doing any sort of ink blending, just to sometimes make sure, especially like lighter colors, like that fog gray is such a light color. The mint is a light color. So I like to make sure that I'm not going to be, introducing other colors of ink into my ink pads. A little bit, you're good to go, but you don't want to end up, adding a bunch. So I went back and forth. I started with the fog gray, and then I'm adding the mint. And I go back and forth a couple times just to blend these. This all blended like a dream. Simon's inks, they are dye inks, but they are not water reactive. So they're very similar to, I think the Hero Arts inks are very similar to this as well in the same sense. And they go on really, really nicely, but they smooth out as they dry. Like they kind of sink deeper into the cardstock and they just smooth. So even when blending like this, you'll see areas that look almost a little tiny bit patchy. Like some areas look darker than others. That all just smooths out as it dries. And then you're just left with this like perfectly smooth blended color. So I just went and blended the colors and then in the end added the Audrey blue to the bottom, kind of let them do their thing. And while this is a fairly fast drying ink when you're applying a fair bit like this, like I literally almost saturated the cardstock a couple times because I'm just having fun blending. But again, didn't take very long. Like just the blending took just a few minutes. I'm now going to use some of the sentiments and of course a bunch of these fun images from this amazing stamp set. That's literally what it's called. That comes in the March kit, but I will link to the stamp set separately as well. So I had a rough idea in my head what I wanted to do, like I wanted what sentiments I wanted to use, etc. So I decided I wanted to do some heat embossing with this because I thought silver would look gorgeous with these colors. So I'm going to stamp my main sentiment first because that's kind of like the focus. So I was very generous with my anti-static powder tool. Like I said, these inks dry pretty quickly. Usually you don't have a problem, but when you've applied a fair bit of ink, you always want to kind of err on the side of caution so you don't have embossing powder clinging to everything. So use my anti-static powder tool, stamp the sentiment with clear embossing ink, and then heat embossed it with Simon's silver embossing powder. And then once I've got that portion done, I can heat emboss some of the other images in this set. And this is definitely, I think this is going to be, if it isn't already, a very popular set because there's just so much you can do with it. It's so fun. And there's no rhyme or reason. I was literally just stamping images and just like, oh, this will look nice here. This will look nice here. You don't really have to put a ton of thought into it. They're just fun images, and they layering them and using different colors of ink and embossing powders and all that stuff. They just turn out so fun. So I embossed just a few of the images. And then the rest, I'm going to stamp with those same 3 inks, which because of the light in my office right now, it's kind of hard to see, but you can see them. I also didn't want them to be very intense. Like I could have grabbed a darker gray ink like Simon's Stone ink. Or was it Smoke? There's Smoke and I think there's Stone. Anyway, a darker gray ink would show up a lot more, but I didn't want it to be very intense. Like I wanted just that light color, that texture. So some of them I stamped in the gray, some I stamped with the mint, some I stamped with the Audrey blue. And it just, it gives all these like different layers and depth and whatnot. So I just went around and kept doing that, kind of stamping them more clustered towards the bottom, but also pulling them up towards the top of my card front here. And then once I was pleased with kind of how everything was looking, I had to add just a little bit of splatter. I was actually going to add more than this. Like, I was like, ooh, I could pull out my watercolors and add, you know, some silver splatter. And, oh, I could get out, you know, some distress inks and add some color splatter. Like, I could have completely gone overboard, but I limited it to just one splatter. So white splatter using just some white gouache that I'm mixing right on my glass media mat here. And you could use like the white picket fence paint that I've shown in recent videos, white craft paint, anything like that. I really like this white gouache though. So I thinned it out a little bit with water, tap that kind of and create the splatter on my cardstock. And then I had set that aside to dry. And while it was drying, I also actually heat embossed one of the sentiments from the set onto some AUDREY blue cardstock, which I'll show in a minute. And then I also wanted to use another one of the sentiments. This one's been really popular. Another sentiment from the Amazing stamp set. So I'm going to silver heat emboss this on my card base as well on the inside. So my card base is more of this 120 pound cardstock, and I stamped the sentiment, coated it with that silver embossing powder. Love when it melts. Always the best part. And then once that sentiment is heat embossed, I'm also going to stamp some more of these images in those same 3 inks that I used on the front of the card, just to tie it all together. So I just kind of went along and stamped these, and that's one of the nice things too about these all being lighter colors is they give that texture and color to the inside of the card, but it's not so dark that you can't write over it easily with, you know, a ballpoint pen. So I just went along kind of stamping these along the edges of the inside of the card. And then for the card front, I'm going to trim this down a little bit because I wanted to pop this up on my card front. So I just trimmed off some of the edges with my little Tim Holtz guillotine trimmer. And then that sentiment that I'd stamped and heat embossed on the AUDREY blue cardstock, I trimmed that down as well. I had actually run it through my die cut machine with one of the sentiment label wafer dies. And then I'm going to pop this up with some of Simon's Big Mama foam tape. I kind of get a chuckle out of it being called Big Mama foam tape. The roll itself, if you ever get this roll of foam tape, the roll itself is huge. It's massive. But the foam tape itself is thinner than standard foam tape, which is what I like. It's just enough to give it a little extra something, but not too much. So I used that, and I also used it on the card front before adhering it to my card base. And then I left it here. I was going to add some of the little jewels and crystals from the card kit because there's fabulous ones and it would look great. But I decided to keep it with just the splatter and the silver heat embossing because this is like the perfect masculine card. So as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I'll have links to the supplies used. I'll also have a link to my card kit unboxing video that I posted earlier. So you can check that out if you are interested. Everything will be linked in the description box below. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.